episode 13 of Killer Stories. I'm your host, Bobbie Holmes. I'm recording during a major windstorm, so you may hear that in the background today. It's actually pretty gnarly. We have about 3 trees down right now, and the wind is still going strong. Today I'm going to talk about one of the most publicized unsolved murders in American history. In case you were living under a rock in the 90s, or some of my listeners may not have even been born yet, I am talking about the murder of Jonbenet Ramsey. Buckle up, you guys, because this is going to be a long one. There are many different suspects and theories in this case, and we're going to cover each one. You may think you know what happened, but after doing my research, I'm definitely questioning my initial theory. Jonbenet Ramsey was born August 6, 1990. Her parents are John and Patsy Ramsey. I was 9 years old when this happened. I remember when I heard the name Jonbenet, I thought it was a fancy French name, like Jonbenet. But the truth is, she is named after her father, Jonbenet Ramsey. They mashed John and Bennett together and made the name Jonbenet. Middle name Patricia after her mother. So not Jonbenet, literally John Benet. Her brother Burke is 3 years older than her. To fully grasp this story, we also need some history on John and Patsy. John was president of a computer system company called Access Graphics. He was a pretty successful businessman. You'll hear later that his bonus in 1996 was more than my annual salary now in 2020. They had 2 private planes and a yacht, so yeah, they were pretty wealthy. Patsy competed in Miss America beauty pageant and was the winner of Miss West Virginia in 1977. She married John in 1980. He was 14 years her senior. After the birth of Jonbenet, the family moved from Atlanta, Georgia to Boulder, Colorado. That's where John's company, Access Graphics, was headquartered. Patsy loved the beauty pageant world and entered Jonbenet as soon as she was old enough to compete. Picture the show Toddlers and Tiaras. Tiny little bodies, huge teased hair, especially in the 90s, heavy makeup, strutting around in their, in my opinion, inappropriate outfits. Might piss some people off here, but kids don't stay kids very long. I don't know why you want to force them to grow up so fast and make them dress and act like grown women. I think it's more about the moms trying to relive their pageant life. Sorry, not sorry. I'll post a variety of pictures for you guys on my social media, but it was actually hard to find natural pictures of Jonbenet. The internet is flooded with her glamour shots and beauty pageant photos. Burke seemed to show signs of jealousy towards Jonbenet. He was the firstborn, but she was the one named after her parents. And Patsy was ecstatic to have a girl so she could mold her into a little beauty queen. The favoritism was obvious, leaving Burke in the shadows. Apparently, Burke showed his distaste for Jonbenet by smearing poop all over her things, which is just so messed up. He smeared poop on her bed, on her toys, and on Christmas Eve, the day before she died, on the boxes of her Christmas presents. As a parent, picturing my 9-year-old having a habit of smearing his feces around the house, I would have a conniption. Photographer and friend Judith Phillips was taking some glamour shots of Jonbenet. She noticed a scar on her head and asked Patsy what happened. Patsy nonchalantly explained that the kids were playing and Burke lost his temper and he hit Jonbenet on the head with a golf club. And that wasn't the only occasion Burke was physical towards Jonbenet. December 25th, 1996. It was Christmas morning. The Ramseys woke up, wiped the poop off of Jonbenet's presents, and had a great day together. That evening, the Ramseys attended a Christmas party at a friend, Fleet White's house. It's a weird name. Fleet White. The party lasted until about 9:30 p.m. Jonbenet fell asleep on the way home. Once they were back to the Ramseys, Burke went upstairs and John laid Jonbenet in her bed. Important to note here, at this point in time, Jonbenet was 6 years old and Burke was 9. 5:52 a.m. on December 26, 1996, Patsy Ramsey placed a frantic call to 911. She came down the back stairs to the kitchen and found a ransom note on the staircase. According to the Ramseys' testimony, after realizing it was a ransom note, Patsy called up to John to check on the children. Burke was asleep in his bed, but Jonbenet was missing. The 911 dispatcher said that Patsy thought she had hung up, but the call continued for another 6 seconds. Her demeanor completely changed from the hysterics while she was on the phone. The last 6 seconds of the call is almost inaudible, but the dispatcher said she heard 2, maybe 3 voices, and Patsy Ramsey saying, "Okay, we called the police, now what?" There are many different things people claim to hear in these 6 seconds. But the truth is, you can't make anything out. It's really, really crappy audio. What I want to know is, why did Patsy hang up at all? You're supposed to stay on the line with the operator until help arrives. But after hanging up with 911, Patsy calls up all her friends and invites them over for support. I love doing podcasts, but part of me wishes this was video so you can see me when I do air quotes, because I do it quite often. Burke was supposedly sound asleep in his bed all night and slept through his mother's hysterical 911 call. The house is a crime scene. Police will want to look it over for clues if their daughter was kidnapped. But hey, come on over. I'm sure their friends just thought they were helping, but they cleaned the kitchen and straightened up the house while they were there, potentially destroying evidence. The ransom note was 2.5 pages long, so more like a ransom letter. I'm going to read you the entirety of this letter. Here it goes. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence an earlier delivery pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned, we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions, and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It's up to you now, John. Victory. SBTC. Are you still with me? A couple of things about this ransom note. First of all, it's not a note. It's 2.5 pages long. Ransom notes are usually very short and to the point. For example, we have your daughter, bring the money to this location at this time, don't involve the police if you want to see her again, etc. Also, ransom notes are usually typed or use clippings from newspapers or magazines to create words. Handwriting a ransom note seems like it could be damning to the kidnapper. There were a few misspelled words in this letter. The words business and possession were spelled incorrectly, yet properly used and spelled the word attaché, which is a new word to me and I had to Google it. It's essentially a briefcase. Attaché. Now that sounds French, right? It's thought that the misspelled words were used on purpose to make it seem like English was not the first language of the kidnapper. Another interesting point in the letter, the kidnapper asked for $118,000. Isn't that a strange number? I mean, at least round up. The Ramsays are loaded, like crazy rich. If I were the kidnapper, I'd be asking for a lot more than that. But the weird thing is, that year John Ramsay's Christmas bonus was, drumroll please, $118,000. Coincidence? A few of the lines used in this ransom note seemed familiar. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies, resembles, if you talk to anyone, even a Pekingese on a lamppost, the girl dies, from Dirty Harry. Don't try to grow a brain, John, is eerily similar to do not attempt to grow a brain from the movie Speed. Police arrived at the Ramsey home as well as the friends who were called in for support. Why the police didn't make the friends leave is beyond me. As the kidnapper requested, they all sat and waited by the phone for a call between 8 and 10 a.m. But that call never came. The only law enforcement at the house during this time was Detective Linda Arndt. She sensed that John Ramsay was very high anxiety at this time, so she gave him something to do. She asked him to search the house top to bottom for anything that seemed out of place. He took his friend with him, Fleet White. Fleet was the host of the Christmas party the night prior. I think it's strange that you would allow the parent and honestly potential suspect to search the house without being accompanied by law enforcement. When John and Fleet opened the basement door, John screamed, "I found her," before he even turned the lights on. Jonbenet was lying on the floor wrapped in a white blanket. It seems suspicious to shout out that you found her when, in the dark, it probably looked like a pile of laundry on the floor. She had duct tape over her mouth, nylon cord ligatures around her wrists and her neck. John, being the super smart man he is, scooped her up, tore the tape off of her mouth, and then carried her upstairs. This is after 1 p.m. She's been down there all day. I'm sorry to state the obvious, but Jonbenet is dead at this point. And I have this in capital letters. Do not mess with the crime scene, you dummy. Or honestly, maybe this was on purpose, to compromise the crime scene with his DNA to take the suspicion off of him. He carried her upstairs and laid her back down on the entryway floor mat, which is so weird. I can understand the parental instinct to pick her up and hold her, but pick her up, walk upstairs, and lay her back down where everyone wipes their feet? I have a 4-year-old son. He has on more than one occasion hid in the closet behind clothes and blatantly ignored my screams looking for him. If I thought my child was missing, you better believe I already checked every inch of my house looking for him. It's a cross between relief and anger when you pull back your dresses in the closet to find him sitting there laughing at you. My point is, if the Ramseys are innocent, I cannot believe they didn't search the house for her. Back to the crime scene. Additional law enforcement was called in. When they arrived, Patsy was holding Jonbenet's body in her arms, rocking back and forth and sobbing hysterically. More tampering of the body and crime scene. There was no sign of a struggle in Jonbenet's bedroom, and no sign of forced entry at any of the doorways of the home. There was a broken window discovered in the wine cellar part of the basement where Jonbenet's body was found. But the window was very small, and the height of the window from the floor in the basement seems like it would be a very inconvenient way to enter and a near impossible way to exit. Police attempt to question John Ramsay, and while approaching him, they overhear him on the phone making travel arrangements. I'm sorry, but who the hell does that just hours after their daughter is found murdered? A guilty person, that's who. The Ramseys were informed that they had to stay in town for the time being. They agreed, but refused to be interviewed individually. They wanted to be interviewed together, and that request was denied. So they just weren't interviewed. I guess you do have the right to remain silent. But why would you refuse? Don't you want to find out who murdered your daughter? The only logical explanation was that John and Patsy Ramsay had something to hide. Not only did they refuse to talk, but they denied the access of police questioning Burke. The Ramseys sought after legal counsel immediately. What was strange about this was that John and Patsy had different attorneys. Wouldn't it be a lot easier to have one attorney representing you both in the case? It made it seem like the two had a conflict of interest here. So they denied formal police interviews, but a week after the death of Jonbenet, John and Patsy went on television for a live interview with the help of a media consultant. This was not a good look. It seemed ingenuine. And how are you going to wait an entire week before speaking out? If this was my child and I was looking for their murderer, I would be shouting from the rooftops for help day one. When John and Patsy finally did speak to police 4 months later, they had been fed information regarding the case and prepped with what to say. The biggest piece of evidence in this case was the ransom note. After further investigation, police were able to trace the ink and the paper back to a specific pen and notepad from inside the Ramsay home. Not only that, but there was a rough draft found inside the desk drawer with the notepad. A freaking rough draft. A team of investigators got together and tried to recreate writing this letter. It took them like 20 minutes to handwrite this note, and that's if you know exactly what you're going to say. Take into account a rough draft, this kidnapper spent some time in the house writing this lengthy, detailed letter. Is that something an intruder would do? And why even write a ransom letter if you killed or were going to kill Jonbenet? What's the point? John and Patsy underwent handwriting analysis to compare to the ransom note. John was not a match, but Patsy was inconclusive, meaning she could have written it. The only fingerprints lifted from the paper were Patsy's. The autopsy came back saying that Jonbenet was hit over the head with a heavy object, as well as strangled with a nylon cord. She had scrapes and bruises on her body, which were similar to what you would find in defensive wounds and a sexual assault. There was no semen found, but it did seem like her vaginal area had been wiped clean. On her lower back, there were 2 small marks that looked like they could have been made by a taser or a stun gun. Another finding was that her stomach contents showed that she had recently eaten pineapple, like it hadn't even started to digest yet. According to the Ramsays, they laid Jonbenet in her bed after returning home from the party. Apparently, Jonbenet's favorite snack or dessert was pineapple and milk, which sounds like a disgusting combination. There was a bowl and a spoon found on the table with pineapple and milk in it. The bowl had both Patsy and Burke's fingerprints on them. It was thought that whoever killed Jonbenet that night had fed her the pineapple, which pointed to either Patsy or Burke. Unless an intruder of the home lured Jonbenet into the kitchen, prepared her a bowl of pineapple and milk while wearing gloves, which seems highly unlikely. Whoever fed her the midnight snack, she was interrupted because more than half of the serving was left in the bowl. The 911 dispatcher's name was Kimberly Archuleta. She said she was never formally interviewed by police. One day, she received papers stating there was a gag order and she wasn't allowed to say anything about the call until she was summoned to testify, which never happened. A grand jury began September 15, 1998, to decide if the Ramsays were to be indicted for charges relating Jonbenet's murder. As far as the rest of the world knew, they were not indicted of these charges. But how it really went down was the grand jury voted yes to indict John and Patsy Ramsay for placing a child at risk in a way that led to her death with obstructing an investigation of murder. But DA Alex Hunter took it upon himself to not prosecute them. He said he didn't believe that guilt could be proven without reasonable doubt. Apparently, a grand jury can make a decision and the DA can be like, yeah, I'm not going to sign that. What a waste of time and resources. Man, it must be nice to have money and know all the right people. You get fed information about the case before being interviewed, and now the DA goes against the grand jury in your favor. In 2003, enough touch DNA was found on Jonbenet's underwear to create a DNA profile of an unknown male. The DNA found did not match any of the Ramsay family, and this is essentially what exonerated them. I'm going to let Wikipedia explain touch DNA to you. This is a direct quote from their website. It is called touch DNA because it only requires very small samples. For example, from the skin cells that are left on an object after it had been touched or casually handled. Touch DNA analysis only requires 7 or 8 cells from the outermost layer of the human skin. The technique has been criticized for high rates of false positives due to contamination. For example, fingerprint brushes used by crime scene investigators can transfer trace amounts of skin cells from one surface to another, leading to inaccurate results. Because of the risk of false positives, it is more often used by the defense to help exclude a suspect rather than the prosecution." End quote. A public apology was made to John and Patsy Ramsay. The DA at the time, Mary Lacey, said, quote, "To the extent that this office has added to the distress suffered by the Ramsay family at any time or to any degree, I offer my deepest apology." What's crazy is that later tests were run on underwear brand new out of the package, and foreign DNA was found on them too. So the fact that there was foreign DNA found on her underwear doesn't necessarily mean it was the DNA of the killer. It could have been DNA transferred there from a factory worker, and the fact that there is foreign DNA should not rule out the Ramsays of any involvement. I touched a little bit on theories, but I'm actually going to stop here for today and come back with part 2 going over all the theories and suspects. I honestly hate two-parters. I never want to wait an entire week to find out what happens, but I'm not going to do that to you guys. I'll drop part 2 here in just a couple of days, and I'll be back next week with another full episode. Source information for today's episode is listed in the show notes. I want to ask my listeners your opinion. I was thinking starting in October to do one paranormal or unexplained story a month. Is that something you guys would be interested in hearing, or should I just stick to true crime? If you go to my Facebook and Instagram page, you'll see a post asking this question, and there's a picture of a creepy house. Please get on and comment so I can get a feel for what my audience would like. I'm at Killer Stories Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. My email is killerstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, this is part 1 of A Killer Story.